Hey guys, welcome to the Banning Leapshire podcast. And it is me once again, Becky Johnson. I am quickly becoming Banning's stunt double on this podcast here. Always a pleasure to spend a couple of moments with you guys and share a little bit of what I'm processing or what the Lord is speaking to me about. And today I just want to jump right into it, actually, because I think there's a lot to say about this. And I'm going to probably sound a little bit bothered. If you don't know me, one thing about me is I get bothered. I get bothered about things. I'm an Enneagram 1 critical personality. And I think that's what kind of fuels some of my preaching as I just think about the things that are bothering me in the world and what I'm seeing. And then the Lord has blessed me with the platform to talk about that. So lucky you get a little glimpse of what is bothering Becky right now. And actually, that's what Banning's podcast is it not? It's just Banning coming on here once a week, talking about something that's bothering him, and he pastors us, and we love it. I want to jump right in. I was talking to my husband. We've been talking about recently this topic a lot, and it's this idea of socially acceptable sin. And if we're honest, there's actually a bunch of just socially acceptable sin. We actually all have like pet peeve sin, stuff that bothers us that we love to talk about more than we talk about other sin, like, hey, I'm okay with gossip, but man, sexual sin, that's a pet peeve sin. We're really going to go after that. Or, hey, I don't address sexual sin and things like that, but I'm going to talk about alcohol. Or, we get these hyper focuses on things, and then there's just stuff that we just don't talk about and we kind of ignore, and we kind of coined that term, right? This is like a socially acceptable sin that it's so prevalent. Where I think that comes from is it's so prevalent and so common, and actually probably something that we're entrenched in, so we just don't want to talk about it. I told you I was going to go right in. You're like, whoa, okay, 8 a.m. talking about sexual sin here. One of those socially acceptable sins that I've identified is actually this issue of coveting, covetousness. I'm going to use a word. We don't use covetousness anymore or often, or envy, jealousy. And the more that I think about it, the more that I realize, oh my gosh, we have a crisis of envy and jealousy on our hands, and we are all partaking of content that is fueling this actually really serious issue. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about coveting and envy and jealousy and how in just our modern day society, and we have to talk about social media with this, how this thing has just crept in, and it's just everywhere, and we're not really talking about it. And I think we're not really talking about it because we are all engaging in it. I'm using big statements as well, sweeping us all with big generalizations. Is one of the 10 commandments, right? One of the 10 commandments actually in Exodus 20. And we know what they are, right? You're not going to have no idolatry. You can't bow down, to any carved image. Don't take the name of the Lord in vain. Remember the Sabbath. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. These are big things. These are the 10 commandments is what defines modern day morality. Where we wonder where morality comes from, good and bad, and even people who are exploring, is there a God or not, and what is true of the Bible, they can understand that much of humanity's morality, whether or not you believe in divine God or not, comes from this ancient text of the 10 Commandments. Why do we know it's wrong to murder? Why do we know it is wrong to have an affair on your spouse? It comes from this framework of the 10 Commandments. And one of the 10 Commandments is, you shall not covet. It's amazing to me that is one of the 10 Commandments. It is up there with murder, with idolatry, with not honoring your father and mother, right? The big serious offenses towards humankind and towards God. And coveting is one of those. And we just don't talk about it very much. We don't talk about the commonality of, and the I'm missing the word here. We don't talk about the prevalence and how rampant envy actually is in our modern day life. And so I want to talk about that. It's backed up by Paul. Actually, in Paul's letters, when he's writing to the churches over and over, and I don't have the time in this podcast to give you all the references, so you can just go look it up. But anytime Paul is talking, he's giving rebukes, and he's telling these churches that are being established, they're learning how to be Christ followers, and he often is addressing where they're missing the mark. He's often addressing, here's where you've fallen back into the ways of the world and you've fallen away from the way of Jesus. And he has to talk about this often. You are being envious. There is strife among you. You are being jealous of one another. It is backed up all the time. Paul is addressing this. And I want to take us to just one of them in Colossians chapter 3. I'm going to read it because of what he does when he links envy to. Colossians chapter 3, verse 5, he says, therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Again, we're talking about we're saying these are the majors. Like, these are the majors of missing the mark and sin, and envy is a part of that. Uncleanness, evil desire, fornication, and envy. He's saying, guys, don't be jealous of one another. Do you know what it is when you're jealous of one another? It is a form of idolatry. Why is it a form of idolatry? Because I am placing what someone else has and my desire for that thing that they have, I am placing it above God. I am now worshiping what they have and I don't. I am worshiping, I'm giving attention to, I am giving affection to either what someone else has, or I'm actually worshiping my lack. I'm giving so much attention and so much space in my heart to what I don't have. If you haven't figured out where I'm going with this by now, let's just say it. We are practically consuming envy when we're on social media. When you really boil it down, and yes, there are, and I know Bannon has talked about social media a few times on this podcast. Yes, there is a good side to social media. Yes, it can be used for some good purposes. But when you really boil it down, it is a constant reminder of what other people have that you don't. We're just scrolling. It's either advertisements of things that you need, things that would make your life better, and we're just scrolling and we are obsessing over everything that someone else is experiencing, over connections they have that we don't, over materials that they have that we don't, experiences, whatever. And it's creating in us jealousy. It's creating in us envy. Guys, to be envious and jealous of others is a form of idolatry. The Bible is clear about this. And this is why I say it's kind of a socially acceptable sin, because I think it's so prevalent that we don't even notice it anymore. I'd almost put it in the camp of gossip, where we don't even really, it's just kind of socially acceptable to talk bad about people. And you don't really think about it. And oftentimes you're not even repenting of it. And you're just like, yeah, it's just kind of what we do. It's like cultural norm to process, vent, and talk bad about one another. It has become a social norm to be envious, to covet, and to be jealous of what other people have that we don't. And I am here to remind you that it is wrong. It is something to be on guard against. It is something to be repenting from and actively turning away from. Paul's saying, if you are envious, it is a sign of carnality. He's saying, if you are envious of one another, and come on, you can think of someone right now that you have experienced this with. You're frustrated, you're jealous of, and we don't want to say these things because we're Christians, so we can't use the word I'm jealous, but internally, we're absolutely pining over the fact that they've had an opportunity, a promotion, a relationship, whatever, that we don't. And we're just watching on social media what everybody else has that we don't. And it's brewing inside of us this form of carnality, which means it's of the world. It's not of God. Actually, when Paul talks about what love is, he's describing what love is, right, to the Corinthians. And he's saying love is kind, love is patient. And we love all of that. We love what love is and who God is. And then he says, love does not envy. Where you are jealous, you are not operating in the way of Jesus. Where you are envious, there is no love there. It is void of those things. They can't coexist. You can't love your neighbor and be envious of your neighbor. You can't love your neighbor and covet what they have. And so we have to be aware of this, that actually, I think social media is not the only thing that breeds this, but it definitely is a big player here because it's just it's actually what it's for. Post what you're doing that other people aren't. Post about what you have that other people don't. And then we get on there and we consume it. And you all know the internal narrative. Nobody talks about the internal narrative that's happening when we're scrolling social media. No one's actually honest enough because it's so painful and we would seem so ridiculous to go back to the app that's feeding an internal narrative that goes like, I'm behind. Man, I don't have nearly as much money. My goodness, I'm not as influential. Look at that person. They're married already with kids. I'm how old? I'm this behind. I don't have this. I've never done that. I'm not there. We coin terms, FOMO. We want people. I've heard people say, I want you to experience FOMO. I am wishing that you experience the fear of missing out. I am wishing upon you that you are jealous of this moment and not being here. Because this is absolute backwards. This is absolutely backwards thinking of the kingdom. And the Bible's talking about it in the Old Testament. Paul's backing it up in the New Testament, that if you are going to follow Jesus, if you are going to be of the kingdom, which we are called to be, and a representative of heaven, an ambassador of Christ, then you have to put away the ways of the world. You have to put away carnality, and envy is a part of the world. The world is envious. The world breeds on jealousy and coveting and strife over who has what and who doesn't. But we are called to operate outside of that. And that is really hard to do in the age of digital marketing and social media and influence. It is really hard to do. And I don't say this to discourage you. I say this to implore you to be aware that this has become a socially acceptable sin that we don't even recognize. So when that stuff happens, we have to go, oh, wait a second, this is so normal in the society that I'm living in. Like the exiles in Babylon, they had to be so aware of the Babylonian way to not be defiled by the Babylonian way. Don't be defiled by the way of the modern world and go, wait a second. Is this present in my heart? Search me. Lord, is there somewhere where I have fallen into coveting, where I have fallen into jealousy and envy? And then, like in Colossians, Paul says, put that to death. Put that to death. Walk away from that. Do not feed that thing. Here's the thing. Some of you need to get off social media because it only produces this type of fruit in your life. It produces carnality. It produces strife. It produces pain. I've heard the definition of insanity. The actual definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. You'd have to be insane, right? To go, I'm going to keep getting on social media, hoping it makes me feel different. It's not working. Have some self-discipline. Be aware. And the act of repentance means I'm going to turn away from this thing. There is something I'm watching. There's something I'm consuming. There's something I'm participating in that causes me to step outside of how God has called me to live. Therefore, I'm going to remove that thing. I'm going to remove that habit. I'm going to turn away because I recognize in me it's producing some things of the world that I don't want present in my life. 3 things that envy does. It distracts, it displaces, and it discourages. And this is what I want to end with this, to be aware of these things and recognize them. Envy distracts me. When I begin, and this is what the 10 Commandments, he says, don't covet your neighbor's wife, don't covet your neighbor's donkey, because they understand, even in the ancient Near East, in this time, people are going to have things you don't. Maybe your neighbor's going to be married to a more beautiful woman, or have more livestock, or have more children. Don't covet what they have. Don't get distracted from what you have. Don't get distracted from what God has given you. When people begin to fall into the FOMO thing and what it is, it's jealousy, it's coveting, it's envy. When people fall into that, you see how distracted they are from what God has done in their life. They're just so distracted. All I can think about is other people. All I can think about is another opportunity, and I am distracted from my assignment. I'm distracted from my place. I'm distracted from my blessing. It distracts me. We don't want to live a distracted life. You want to live a focused life. So envy distracts, envy displaces. This is why it's linked to idolatry. It displaces God in your life. It displaces your worship. My worship is it's whatever gets my time and my affection. Right? You want to find out what you worship, follow the trail of your time and energy. So whatever my time and my affection go to, there's my worship. And envy displaces your worship. All of a sudden, I'm giving more time and more energy and more affection to what others have. Sometimes we're worshiping our own idea of our lives timeline. Like, we're so obsessed with where we think we should be, what we think should have happened, that we're actually worshiping that over God. We're worshiping the timeline that we think things should happen in, and all of our energy and all of our time and all of our focus is going there. And so this is why he's saying covetousness, which is idolatry. You coveting anything, anyone, any ideal, any idea, it displaces your worship, which belongs to Jesus. It distracts, it displaces, and finally it discourages. It discourages you. You are never going to be grateful and excited and expectant when you are worrying about what others have that you don't, or where other people are and you're not. It is just so discouraging to fall into this trap. You know, they have a better life. They have a better setup. They have better relationships. They have a better job. They have a better family. I'm telling you, you feed yourself enough of that, you will be discouraged. The stats are so crazy on social media. It's so crazy. Like, they can't find no report is coming out that says, after I spend a significant amount of time on these apps, I feel better. They've been studying now for a decade. After we spend a significant amount of time on social media, we feel discouraged because it is a constant reminder of what other people have that you do not. And it is a vulnerability when we're consuming that content to begin to feed things like envy and strife and jealousy and contention. And it's discouraging. Who's encouraged after looking at all the places you're not and all the things you don't have? So it's just simply discouraging, and you're called to live an encouraged life. You're called to live a focused life. You're called to live a life that's worshiping Jesus. And so if envy does these things, it distracts and displaces and discourages. We have to be aware. This thing has crept in. I think envy and coveting has crept in to every aspect of our society. And I think it's become one of those, it's just socially acceptable to sit there and obsess over what we don't have. You know what else it will do? It will completely steal your ability to celebrate others. And we are called to celebrate others. We are called to celebrate our brothers and sisters and to, rejoice with those who are rejoicing and celebrate those who are promoted and celebrate those who are advancing. But when you are locked in envy and when you are locked up in jealousy, you cannot celebrate others. You cannot honor others. You can't get excited for them. So my challenge for you this week is to be aware. And man, and this is difficult. I'm telling you, this is hard to admit. At least it is for me. It is hard to admit, I have settled into a place of real envy there. And if you don't know if you have, or you're having a hard time discerning, just ask yourself, where have I gotten distracted? Where's my worship been displaced? And where am I discouraged? Look for those 3 things and then follow the trail and see what's attached to it. All right. There's my encouraging talk for you and what's bothering me. And I believe we can live an unenvious life. I really do. I believe we can live outside of coveting. It's crazy, right? We're like, we don't read the 10 Commandments and go, well, I don't know if I can't, I don't know if I can withhold murdering somebody. Like I might, right? That's ridiculous. We draw these hard lines in the sand. Coveting is in there. It's in there. Do not covet what your neighbor has. It's idolatry. We recognize that and put envy in its proper place. We'll be more aware of it and more on guard against it in our lives because it has no place. It has no place. We have, through Jesus and the Holy Spirit, the power and grace enabled by the Holy Spirit, we can live above that temptation and really step out of that. Watch what happens in your life. Watch your relationships flourish. Watch your internal world begin to level up and out of maybe even a depression when we walk away from envy and say, I'm going to be thankful for what I have. I'm going to celebrate what others are doing, and I'm not going to fall into that trap. All right. You guys are awesome. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.